There are a number of things that you don't really understand about taking care of a parent when they come to live with you towards the end of their life. I've shared a couple of those over the episodes here on the Valuability Podcast. The last one was probably the most shocking to me, and that was the fact that when my mother ended up dying in 2015, I had spent zero time thinking about what my life would be like afterwards. And the reason for that was that every time while my mother was still alive that I would think about, gee, what's it going to be like after my mom dies? Immediately, these feelings of guilt and like this thought of, oh, you're hoping that your mother dies. You're a jerk. You're a terrible son. Why are you thinking about that? And it was very subconscious. I got to that point and it just happened that I realized that I had virtually no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I start out with this story because this week we have a very special guest coming on. Debbie Pepin is going to talk about the death to-do list, and she is going to be our special guest for episode 28 of the Valuability Podcast. The Valuability Podcast is for financial professionals, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business, leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. My name is Danforth Fleek. I was a financial advisor and product wholesaler for a number of years. Joined each week by my co-host, friend, and mentor, Philip Simonson. Also held a wide range of positions in financial services, including field leader, sales trainer, and senior manager. Philip, you often refer to me as number one son because I'm older than all of your sons, but in reality, I'm also a youngest son.
Yes. Yes, you are. From the biological family.
Correct. So I kind of have dual roles there. I'm the oldest in my adopted family, but the youngest. But that makes me identify most with your youngest son, who is actually coming up to visit for Thanksgiving, correct?
He's been up, and they went back home because
they've already left.
We did the deer hunting last weekend, and it's deer hunting's closed now. From a rifle standpoint, bow is still open till the 31st.
Good. And plans for Thanksgiving?
Pretty quiet this year. We're all practicing that. The proper, sequestering behaviors, I guess. I don't, I can go open up a
self-quarantining, right?
Yeah. And yes, that's the right way to put it. And we are, and it's the right thing to do at the present time.
Yep. Yeah, same here. We're doing a family Zoom, and the matriarch of the family
95. That's pretty powerful. We do the same thing. My mother-in-law is 97, so we'll do the same.
Yeah, it's my grandfather's youngest sister is the last one alive there, and she still runs the show. And even though she's my great aunt, I referred to her as my aunt, which curries great favor with her.
Absolutely.
So you can find the Valuability Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. We also have a YouTube channel. Search Value-Ability to find us there. Best way to find us on our website, value-ability.com, under the episodes tab. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. If you'd like to touch base, email info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. Or you can reach out to us through social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. All can be found at value-ability.com under the Contact Us tab. So our guest this week, Debbie Pepin, her website is deathtodolist.com. the actual URL has dashes between each word, but you can also just type death to do list, all one word.com, and it will take you to the correct website. You can also search death to do list on LinkedIn, and Debbie's professional profile pops up. You can also find her on Twitter. She is Pepin. That's Pepin _ Debbie on Twitter. And you can also obviously search for her name on LinkedIn. She has a stronger presence on LinkedIn because financial world is a little bit more heavily integrated with that platform. So let's jump in to our conversation with Debbie Pepin to discuss the death to-do list. And now we are very excited to welcome Debbie Pepin to the Valuability Podcast. Debbie runs a business and website focused around the death to-do list. And in my background, I have had some study of death and working with widows and widowers. And so when I found her website, I was really, really excited to talk about this topic, and found that she's even more excited about it than I am. Debbie, start out with, what is your background and what led you to the idea for the death to-do list?
Okay, well, first of all, I have no real credibility because I have not died yet. And that becomes a problem because my real goal is to publish a book with a major publishing firm that will be a very easy guide to everything you need to know to make sure that you're ready to die. Mm-hmm. So I don't have that kind of credibility, and I haven't even been a funeral home director. So I have to rely on the fact that I've lived life. And in 2017, I had 3 parents that I had legal and ethical responsibility for all die within an 8-month period. Prior to that, my dad and his dad, and my dad was an only child, my dad and his dad were killed in the same accident when I was 20 years old. So death was never new to me. It was a little draining in 17 when 3 parents didn't have their stuff together, because not in terms of legal paperwork. And when I talk about stuff, I rarely talk about the legal paperwork, though my book does outline all of that. So it's an easy, slim, funny reference guide. What I'm talking about is my experience. You asked me my background was trying to help these 3 individuals that I loved figure out that talking about death wasn't going to kill them, and that living each day the best they could was what it was all about. One of my slogans, I actually own the website, is the purpose of life is life with a purpose. Mm-hmm. And trying to get the 3 of them to realize that just plain sharing, what do you want? I mean, it's, yes, you, all 3 of you ended up with terminal diagnoses, but you weren't in writhing pain. You weren't, life wasn't terrible. Tell me what I should be doing to help you get where you want to get at the end of life. And when they all died, I realized that these conversations should be happening when you're 18 years old. These conversations should be happening the same way we're happy to discuss birth. They should be happening the same way our freaking television talks about penile dysfunction ads and hot flashes. But no, death becomes this morbid taboo. I'll walk out of the room and use all sorts of other expressions to talk about the word death. So if we're going to do that, you're going to end up with the kind of situation that I had with 3 parents who, yes, they grew up in the 30s and 40s. They felt that life was so precious, you shouldn't do anything to jinx it. But the truth is that life and death are intertwined. You can't escape death. The name of my book is In Case You Die, with an asterisk. By the way, you will. You know, that's what it's all about, is make today awesome. You have no promise for tomorrow. As a matter of fact, you don't even have promise for the next hour. We used to say you might get run over by a bus. Today, it seems to be the vogue thing to say in case you get COVID. Um, but the end of the story is that we don't come with expiration dates. We're not a container of yogurt. There's nothing on our body that tells us when the end is coming. And yet we all live it, or at least most of us live it, with this mentality that says, hey, I'm not really old, so I'm going to live forever. And therefore, we'll put everything off. Don't have those deep thoughts on what do you want to do in your lifetime, which means today. It doesn't mean when you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, because only 65% of Americans even make it that far.
Right. And then when you get there, which I'm, 63 years around the sun, and a neighbor, Jim, who's probably in his early 70s, he reminded me, he said, look, in this retirement or renewal, renewal, because you want to find another purpose, as you said, Debbie. And there's your go-go years, then there's your slow-go years, and then if you're lucky enough, there'll be your no-go years. So I think you're spot on with what you're saying. And as you reflect back, like you said, it's people don't want to talk about it. Is it what's the biggest emotion that causes this block in from your viewpoint that inhibits people to bring up the subject matter?
Fear,
Yep.
absolute fear. And again, when I say talking about death won't kill you, when you really push people to have that conversation, it will be, oh, that's not something we were comfortable in our family. I didn't grow up with those.
Right.
We weren't supposed to talk about that. People don't die, they pass on, they move to a better place. They are,
Euphemisms are great, right?
well, and they do awful things. We have all sorts of research on what they do to kids, especially. They're looking for their father under the bed because they've been told that
Right.
he's moved on. Well, where'd he move on to?
Right. Yeah, that was a big thing as well in the training that I received, was that euphemism of death, to the grieving person, minimizes their emotions at that time. And I know that's not really the side of it, but that we're discussing, but it also allows you to continue that distancing yourself from the very concept of it, that it's out there. We all know it. We all know that it's going to happen. I've had moments where you really everyone has, where you really come face to face with that concept. And it's super important though, right? That advisors start to remove that instinct from their vocabulary. And I still catch myself wanting to use euphemisms, but it is really important that you start just with using the word death, right?
Well, again, my experience, and I'm adding to your question, my experiences and my research show that financial advisors who get to talk to people about probably the most private thing they're willing to
Amen.
talk about, and that's their money. It's not something they usually bring up at a cocktail party, depending on who they're with or who they used to be with pre-COVID. It's they get to hear all these things. I have this much money. This is how I made it. This is how much I'm about to inherit. This is what I'm working on right now. They hear all these things, and yet the average financial advisor is only able to say, well, I hope you have your will in order, or in some legal checklist that they've created, or their firm has created, or the wholesaler that they're selling has created. And then they say, phew, got that one done. Let's talk about where do you want to invest? Well, how can you possibly invest well? How can you possibly make good decisions if you don't know who that person really is, if you don't know what their gut is. But I've concluded the reason that financial advisors have a hard time with that is because financial advisors are no different than the average human being in America. I won't talk about other cultures, it gets a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that they don't talk about death. That the average financial advisor squirms. And when I come in, when I'm brought into a group of financial advisors, you can see the squirming. You can see the, oh my goodness, she was really going to talk about death, not just what do you check off on the checklist and maybe we need to add something. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and he died. And by the way, Dan, your fish on the bottom of the fish tank is not sleeping. He's dead.
Are you going to tell me Daisy's not at a farm?
Right. Daisy's not at a farm, and we buried it there because that's one of our customs. You know, the whole thing is we're afraid. We're afraid to have the discussion. Well, we're chasing our tail. Why are we afraid to have the discussion? Because it's been kept in a locked vault. Why don't we bring it out? Because it's been kept in a locked vault. Why don't we say it's important to talk about death so you make better planning? Because you have to use the word death. I mean, this whole thing is never going to change if people like you, if people like some of the advisorship firms that I've had an opportunity to meet and do some work with start to say, you're right. How can I be different? How can I be a better firm? And it's like, you're right. Nobody talks about these things. We get the paperwork done. We might send them to our own lawyer because we're a complete comprehensive advisement firm, or we might send them to a lower price place, or we might send them to an online service. But we certainly don't regularly engage in discussions about death. Well, you and I both know over the years, and Philip, you just talked about this, over the years, life changes and you're going to want to make changes. You're not going to, you know, you might have a different partner, you might have
Right.
children, you might have a whole different occupation or way that you're making money. That may change your philosophy and hence how you do your planning. But if you're not talking about it, if you're just plain filling out paperwork, which is the least important thing, in my opinion, because if you die and you don't have all your paperwork in order, the truth is it's not going to be as bad of a mess as everybody tells you it's going to be. It's going to get through, you know,
Right.
and you're dead anyway. So what's the difference? More importantly, is did you talk to people about the fact did you want to be incubated? No inference to COVID for lengthy periods of time. Did you want to be resuscitated numerous times? Did you want artificial feeding for years to stay alive? Those conversations with people that you love are really, really important. And I don't know if I should digress, but in my book, one of the things I speak to is my own mother. And she was a very quiet, very private person.
Mm-hmm.
But she had her paperwork in order because she was an MBA and lived that typical MBA sort of life. And when she was in her final months, everyone said, where's your paperwork, Nancy? Where's this? Where's that? And of course, it's prominently displayed here or there. Well, fast forward to her death, she, her husband, the only person she would grant the I guess he was, though I could argue it, but could grant the living power of attorney was her health power of attorney was unable to find the paperwork. She ended up being resuscitated twice, totally against her will.
Yeah.
And by the time the hospice facility that she was finally moved into was able to get the paperwork from me because they were closed, because their fax machine wasn't working, because it was a Friday. I mean, seriously, the excuses were unbelievable. It was kind of too late. They had put her in this comatose state for an extended period of time that she was absolutely against. But she named the wrong person to be her voice. that being her addled husband,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't make it well known, here's my wishes, because saying them, having them written as a letter, talking to a doctor, whispering to a nurse who's leaning over you is worth a whole lot more than having the EMTs come in, and their role, unless they see otherwise, is to keep you alive.
Right.
So so here I speak to the fact that the paperwork isn't the most important. It's the discussions that are most important. And we miss that. We miss the fact that frequently in a family, someone, whether you got run over by a bus and you're only 24 years old, and you're laying there, probably taking your last breath, and all the loved ones have gathered. Oh my God, he's only 24. This never should be happening, blah, blah, blah. And the doctors are saying, tell me, do you want all the medical intervention there can be? Should I, this is what I could do. Here's the alternative. This is this. And you usually end up with one family member who's absolutely different than everybody else. And that person's like, no, you
Right.
need to do this. You absolutely need to do this, yelling, screaming, crying, and maybe more articulate. And that medical team is forced to make a decision without paperwork, without having received it themselves, without having heard the person say it themselves. They're going to be swayed by that family leaning over the bed. Don't do that. Share what you want and change it. Change it all the
Mm-hmm.
time. I say do it on every decade birthday is a great time to look at changing that. But having ongoing conversations, making a video, making an audio, writing a letter, those things are just as important as checking the boxes with your financial advisor and your estate attorney. In reality, my mom died an awful death because not because she didn't have paperwork, but because the paperwork wasn't used correctly.
Right.
So don't kid yourself, Mr. or Mrs. Financial Advisor, that making sure all the paperwork is done gets you off the hook. It doesn't.
That's really it activated a bunch of things thinking about that. So in my own life, when I very distinctly remember, I know exactly where we were sitting. We were sitting at a light about to turn into the housing development we lived in when we lived in Tallahassee, Florida. So I was probably 6 or 7 years old, waiting for a left turn light. My mother, for whatever reason, turns to me and says, one day I'm going to be lying in a hospital bed and I'm going to look at you and it's going to be over. And that's going to mean that I want to die. Remember that. And
You do.
she had polio, lots of health problems, polycystic kidneys, kidney transplant. Once the transplant happened, she knew when that kidney was gone, it was either go back on dialysis or die, and she did not want to go back onto dialysis. So the other meeting that it triggered was my mom's been in and out of the hospital. They can't really figure out what's going on, all kinds of weird symptoms. They finally get down to the fact that because her muscle mass is so low, that they could not tell that her kidney had failed.
Yeah.
Her
Mhm.
transplanted kidney had failed. So we get together and there's this meeting, and it's the two standard doctors. It's a palliative care guy, it's the nurse, it's my mom's kidney doctor, and it's me. And so they start talking to me. They're like, well, your mother's kidney is failing, we believe, and so on and so forth. And they just kept talking around and talking around and talking around. And finally it dawned on me what was going on. And I said, wait a second, is this meeting for me? You're all worried about what I'm going to think, that my mom wants to come home and die? Yeah, we need to, I've known this for 40 years. I'm fine with it. But here's the other really interesting thing that it triggered was my brother flipped out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Super mild, super reserved, never says anything in a crowd.
Right.
I mean, modest mouse, wonderful human being, but very, very, very quiet. Flipped out on me for maybe the second time in my life. He's 10 years older, was 10 years older than me. why isn't she going on dialysis? She can do dialysis at home. She can do this. She can do that. Why is she doing this? And that's when I realized she never had those
Sounds like you
conversations with
did.
him.
Mhm,
She always had them with me,
mhm.
but she never had them with him. And it took him probably a week to come around. And then once he came around and he accepted it, but it was just a stark difference in those two reactions, fully based on the fact that over the years my mom had always, jokingly said after that very serious conversation, yeah, hey, just put the pillow over my face.
Well, everyone says that, right.
Right.
Well, I'm not to piggyback or jump on, but you raised I'm going to couple. I've had a different experience on all of this. But Debbie, you're right. A couple things I'm just going to highlight that you said. Look, the financial advisor, I've always joked, but there's some truth behind every joke. They're a glorified social worker by heart, but they're a capitalist by brain if they're good. Because within 1 hour, they are finding out everything. And that's a unique skill about that individual. But they've got to help their clients, like you just said. You got, the phrase I use: plan for the certainty of uncertainty. You can be certain we're going to die. We just don't know when. We need to have this conversation, as you're saying, and it's just not about checking the boxes off. And I don't. I'm so one thing I'd like you to, if you could weigh in on. I've actually Five Wishes. I don't know if you've ever
Mhm.
seen that
Oh, yeah.
document. And,
Mhm.
I go through it now, 60, I said 63 years around the sun. We do it every year. We look at it and we update it, my wife and I, and our children know where it is. We talk also about what we want, even the songs that are, a funeral, and my wife wants to be cremated. When we come upon holiday times, it's a great time your family's together to have the conversation. My dad, though, also, what he taught me the dignity of dying. I'm in LA. He's 89, 1918. He's first generation over here in this country. He uh, never graduated from high school. I figured that out. Ended up doing quite well, but but it was the dirty 30s. Had to go off to the the camps, and he got uh, what, $30, 20, he got to take five, send 25 home, then went off to World War II, etc. But he called me up. I'm in LA. He says, I'm going to die. I said, well, yeah, Bob, we talk about that. We have, we're all going to die. He said, no, I'm going to die and you're going to do it. And I said, okay, now this conversation just became heightened. And I said, all right, what do you mean? He says, I'm on dialysis. I've been on it for 5 years. He's diabetic. He said, I used to think of it as a life sentence. It's no longer a life sentence, and I'm not contributing to society anymore. I've had a great life, um, and I want to end it. And I can either end it with pain and go off dialysis and live 5 to 8 years, or you can do it, and this thing can be over within, an evening. I said, okay. Um, have we got to talk to the family about this, um, and I said, your brother, your oldest son, he's a minister, and the other one, he thinks he's your best friend. And, of course, there's my sister. He says, why me? Why am I the chosen one here? He said, well, I think, one of the jobs of a parent is to make sure you raise your children so they have, healthy enough self-esteem that they can carry on. And he said, I think you can handle it. And I said, okay, have you talked to your doctor? He says, yeah, I've got the morphine. Here's the game.
Mhm,
Or here's not the game, but here's how it's going to work.
mhm.
So we had the conversation, and I got everyone out of the house at 10 o'clock, and he wanted to die in his bed. And he said, okay. And then my mom always slept with one eye open, for the last few years, and you got to be careful. The tread's going to come off the caretaker of the, faster than the person who's actually sick. So I said, well, Mom, what they used to do, they'd have a little orange juice because he's diabetic, to keep him through the evening. I said, in honor of Dad, why don't we have a little orange juice, and then you go to sleep. And she's an old nurse and RN, and served in World War I, II, over in Guam, etc. And So she's seen this before, and etc. But I didn't want her there. This is going to be hard enough already. So I slipped her a couple little drops of morphine in her orange juice while she went and got ready for bed. And so she would sleep during the evening. And about 1 o'clock, I asked my dad, and he just said, "Look, here's the objective." As we started this whole process, he said, I don't want to be here by 7 a.m. in the morning.
Mm.
It'll be done. I've seen this. I've lived this. In World War II. Just keep giving me the morphine, and even if I don't want it, you keep giving it to me. Your objective is I'm not awake by 7 in the morning. And I said, okay. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I said, "Pop, what's it like?" He says, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, what's it like to die?" And and it was the greatest gift he could have given me. He said, "You know what? I'm on a cliff, and I'm going to jump off, and I'm going to be okay." And those are the last words he said to me. And I thanked him. I said, "Thank you for showing me and giving me the dignity of how to die." I don't, and not everyone gets that, but your point, that opportunity. But the point is that, it's part of life, and it's natural as long as we have an opportunity to talk about it. We also sat down as a family and talked about it before we started administering it. Of course, the doctors, the morphine had, they knew what was going on, and they were going to honor his wishes versus a painful death, which I think is humane.
Yeah.
Some people on this call might, who listen to this might not think this is humane. I'm Dr. Kevorkian or whatever, but I was honored, and I was honored to be picked as to be able to help them go to where, is there, the world beyond. I'm not going to get into all that and digress, but it was quite an honor. So I think you're right on.
Well, Philip, and thanks for sharing that, because one thing you said that really complements what I'm trying to share with the world is you need a purpose. Every single day, you need a purpose. And you said your dad said to you, "I have no more purpose. My life has been lived. It's a great life. I'm done." That's a choice. Some people don't believe you get to make that choice. But the truth is, we all want to be here for a reason.
Right.
We can't always find our purpose, and we do get lost, and our purpose changes. But for your dad to be articulate enough to say, "I just feel so awful. Life is so terrible. I'm really done. I'm just looking back at what's happened." He just obviously demonstrate that the purpose of life is life with a purpose. And at the point in
Amen.
time that you stop believing you have a purpose, and your purpose can be to read one page in the book. Your purpose can be to drink that
Yeah.
whole glass of orange juice. There's no value judgment on what's that
Right.
purpose. It's for you. But when he said to you, "I'm done, my life has no purpose," don't we need to think about that in our own life? Maybe kick ourselves a little harder, maybe figure out what is our purpose. In COVID and people being stuck home who don't like being stuck home, you do have to reinvent yourself. And it takes a whole lot more work, because if it weren't for that damn whatever, I wouldn't have this problem. Well, you do have this problem. So what are you going to do about it? And your dad finally got to that point where he just said, "Nope, nothing else I'm going to do."
Right.
And that's fine.
That's absolutely. I agree, Debbie, and I think you're right. And do you have any specific questions? Because I have some that I would ask my clients, because I agree with you with that purpose. And I look at success. Success are those things that one does for oneself, and success dies with a person. Significance are those things that one does for others, and it lives on after you're gone. So I think having a purpose is so powerful. Do you have questions that you could share to help advisors, help clients, or just even people who are listening, to find their purpose?
Absolutely. And of course, my goal is to get a book published that people can read a lot of this. And so I'm simultaneously working with advisors so that they can, in whatever way they're meeting with clients. The big Florida firm that I used as a beta site is still meeting in person with 90% of their clients. But what's the first thing I suggest they do is after they get comfortable with death, and that's usually a long process. It's in itself
Mm-hmm.
is to be honest that you're comfortable enough with death that you're not going to find yourself saying, "Well, he passed," or "Oh, if they have the paperwork, I'm okay." You got to get them beyond that. If they get beyond that, my favorite thing to do, and I speak about it in the pamphlet that I recently self-published just to have something to distribute to financial advisors when I can't be with them in person. The main thing is to write your obituary. Right now, this minute, stop. Because guess what? I can see the future and you're going to drop dead tonight. So, what is your obituary going to say? I want you, and I'll give them a couple sample templates and, write your obituary. And a lot of people, I mean, it's a great exercise. It's upsetting. People cry. And if people get too upset, I say, okay, write an obituary for a friend. Don't even make it yours if you can't handle it. But I'd really like you to write your own obituary. And that process, and then we come back in groups and small groups and teams or do it virtually, is what's missing in that obituary. Well, I haven't been a grandparent yet. I'm waiting, or I haven't done this because I don't have enough money, or I haven't traveled here because I haven't done that, or I haven't volunteered with this group that's so important to me, but all I've done is given them $1,000 a year because I don't have time. So we have lengthy conversations about that because that's really what legacy is. I mean, we all talk
Right.
legacy as if it's this $1 million gift you're going to give someone when you die, and that has nothing to do with it. I mean, we've ruined the term. We've ruined the term legacy, in my opinion. But so we do that with the obituary, and people make this list of, oh my goodness, these are all the things I hope are really in my obituary. And we have these lengthy conversations on what's stopping you. How come you can't do some of this now? How come you can't start to put things in action? How come your excuse is time, money, whatever? And what are you going to do about it? And then I usually come back in a couple of weeks or a month and say, okay, we're going to take that obituary. But guess what? I just found out new news. You're not dying until your 100th birthday. You're dying that night. So what's your obituary going to look like then? And everybody
Mm-hmm.
has a whole lot more fun writing that obituary. And so obviously,
Love this
because they
exercise.
can get
This is great.
everything done. Oh yeah, I'm going to have
Mm-hmm.
done this. I'm going to have traveled the world, and I'm going to have given money, and I'm going to have helped save the elephants and created a vaccine for this, and all these things that have been in my brain somewhere. And it's like, okay, so how do we juxtapose that obituary we wrote that you were dying today, and now this that you're not dying until your 100th birthday? What do we change about life? Because for a financial advisor, that's the legacy preparation. That's the pushing people. That's, I got to leave some money available easy for these people because they're really pretty hot on giving more money to the XYZ Foundation and starting to volunteer there. So, how can a financial advisor do a great comprehensive job if they haven't had that kind of discussion? And I do find that the two obituaries are a great way to help get there
Yeah.
because the disconnect is usually so huge. I'm happy to say mine isn't, but I've had a lot of time to think about that.
You're in alignment then.
Yeah, exactly. But that's my first suggestion to financial advisors.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And that helps them out and gets them ready as well for the next stage, the renewal stage. I don't, instead of the retirement stage, I like the renewal. You got another opportunity to, it's change and just get yourself ready for it. And that's a great exercise.
So your pamphlet, which is ideas to address death planning with clients, is available on your website, correct? Yep. So right on the death-to-do-list.com website, there's a link to be able to get a copy of that. And Debbie was nice enough to send a copy to me. And one of the things that I love about it is typically you get books that are, just what I call bloviation, right? It's just yammer, 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 yammer. Let me talk about how much I know. And this is really, I don't even call it more of a workbook. Like, it's just full of different exercises and ideas on how to actually have conversations with clients. And that's what I really, really loved about it when I got the chance to take a look at it. So definitely go to the website and check that out.
Can I interrupt for one again?
Yeah.
People are going to look at my website trying to find that, and it works for more than just financial advisors. That was just if I had to pick a group. I had someone call me late yesterday and say, "Well, I signed up for your ebook, which is also available on my website, but what's the other thing?" So the ebook is just a quick. I mean, this podcast is doing more than my ebook does. My ebook is a teaser. The pamphlet, which is $10, let me not say it's free. My pamphlet or my workbook is $10, and that's you actually get sent from a link on my site to eBay to pay for it because I didn't want to set up all the different sales tax issues.
Right. Smart move.
Yeah. So if folks are interested in incorporating their concepts beyond just getting the workbook or the pamphlet and using it themselves, but people are interested in working with you directly, how have you worked with financial professionals, both the retail financial advisor, and then also if we have any wholesale distributors out there listening, how would you work with, and how do you work with financial professionals, and what types of things are you doing with people? And also a caveat to that, of course, is knowing that some of this is digital for the time being and otherwise in person afterwards.
Right. I'm not good at virtual. I don't like virtual. I'm a hugger and a jump up and down and change my costume and start as an old lady and turn into a professional young lady or vice versa while I'm running a lot of these exercises. But that being said, and that's why I put out the pamphlet, because death is really tough to do this way. I'm advising a hospice group right now, and they're trying to do all this virtual, and it's falling flat all the time. And the reason is that what you end up is just with the paperwork, but the legal paperwork. But that being said, when I've worked in person or on the cases that I've agreed to do something virtually, what we've been doing is going through a lot of tough questions. Like, not again, what do we think of as being the tough questions? We think of the tough question as, what do you want your memorial service to be like? Well, that's okay, that's fine. I get that. And I have a whole chapter in my Slim book about that. But the tougher question is, people are having a party at the cemetery and you're there crying your eyes out because you went to pay respects to great grandma. How do you react to people having a party at a tombstone? And boy, did we have some great conversations about that. Like, yeah, we do that. We actually have a family reunion once a year where we go to the tombstones of kind of the family and we sit around, and we've always seen it as somber. And based on this conversation or these conversations, this year we're going to try it as a party because we really should be celebrating. Why are we crying? Or those people who say that's disgusting, it should be a somber location, and so it opens up all sorts of discussions, and it makes you think about, how do you feel about that particular circumstance? Can you get your head around how it might work or not? So I have created about 300 scenarios like that we throw out there and try and use and talk about and come back to and redo. And people seem to like that because our mind, which has been pretty shallowed, says, but I have a DNR. Instead of,
Right.
instead of, is it possible to be incubated for a short period of time and then have left instructions that say, if it doesn't work in 3 days, stop? That's a great conversation. And it is possible. And you need to learn that. And you're not going to learn it by filling out the legal paperwork. You know,
Right.
it's just so many times we think we've done everything, and when new things are brought up, people go, I didn't know that, or I've never thought about that, or I wish we've talked about that. So my goal is, again, if we're going to talk about death as a part of life, we need to hit all the different buttons. And that includes doing exercises that may give you discomfort, they may make you laugh, and they may make you walk out of the room. But the bottom line is doing these kinds of exercises forces you to realize what you do and don't know, and forces you to realize what the law allows, what it doesn't allow, what opportunities exist, what are ones you've created as boundaries that aren't necessarily
Hmm.
boundaries. So again, it's hard to I work with the group. Wholesalers have been wonderful in wanting to sponsor these groups. So let's say we have a firm of 50, a good sized firm of 50 advisors, and the owner or the chair or whatever his or her title is has said, we're all going to do this. I'm making everybody go through this because I think it'll make our firm stand out. And I'm thrilled to be meeting firms like that who are saying that. I want to be different. And no, there's no money in it. By the way, why do I think it's not happening everywhere? The bottom line is there's no real money in it. And if you spend every minute of your day thinking, how do I monetize this? You can't monetize what I'm talking about. Can it make your firm stand out? At the end of a decade, does it make your firm the one somebody chooses because your reputation on caring about more than just paperwork and making sure you see what the returns were this year are more
Right.
than just the simple conversation? But it has to have a futuristic leader that says we're going to stand out, we're going to do things differently. And I've actually am now working with a couple individual advisors who their boss doesn't feel that way, but he or she allows them to have the freedom to work with their clients the way they want to work with their clients. So that's another way. But wholesalers, and I missed it, have been saying, not only do I want to send some reps, but we'll pick up the tab for lunch, or we'll pick up the tab for a happy hour, or we'll do a coffee, just send us the
Sure.
bill, because they want their name associated with doing things a little differently. And that's great. And again, I can't do this at all. I'm just one person. And I spent a lot of my professional career pre not dying. I spent a lot of my professional career speaking and consulting and traveling the world. Even if I spent every minute of every day and there wasn't COVID, I can't possibly reach enough people. The only
Right.
way I can reach enough people is to get people like yourselves, whether it's through podcasts and TED Talks and national speeches, but through wholesalers who are going in, having the opportunity to touch their clients meaning the individuals who are selling their product, and getting them to see that there is value. It is able to be monetized. It's just not short term.
Yeah, I will second the fact that when I was wholesaling, I was always looking for, the catchphrase is value added, but just really good substantive things to offer financial advisors. So if you're a financial advisor out there and this is a topic that is interesting to you, talk to your wholesalers, get them in touch with Debbie and say, hey, we want to bring this to, our part of the world. And I also go on and say, uh, you may feel like you're not good digitally, but you do very well. I think obviously we all do better in person, but
The virtual hug.
digitally
Here we go,
you
Deb.
also do very well. So just wanted to mention that as
I
well.
hate it.
Understood, but that does not come through when we're watching you. So um running up on the end of our time together, but we always want to ask a question, one specific question of all of our guests. Philip, do you want to ask the valuability question?
You go right
Okay.
ahead.
So what one pearl of wisdom or saying that you got from either a relative or a friend or a mentor that is especially significant to you over the years?
That's really hard because all of us have a story. All of us have a lot to teach one another. If we spend the time to really look in people's eyes and look into their soul, even virtually, there's a whole lot there. But I think the one person who touched me the most was a college professor. And I was a crazy, finished my bachelor in 2 years, did a master's while I was working
Little
full
type
time.
A.
Yeah, and I was finishing a 6-year degree while working full time and consulting full time in Newport, Rhode Island,
Wow.
working in Connecticut and teaching, and finishing a 6-year degree in school administration, walking with the head of he's since died, walking with the head of the ed admin department of University of Connecticut. And he said, "So what are you going to do, Debbie? I mean, you are on such a great trajectory." And I turned to him and I said, "I'm 28 years old. I've only got, 6 years teaching under my belt. I'm a woman. What can I do? I guess I'll be a department chairman or something and see where I can go from that." And he turned to me and he said, "Okay, since you've written the rest of the story, I guess there's nothing we need to talk about."
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
And needless to say, almost the next day, I went up and applied for big assistant principalships in high schools and made my career go further, even though I ended up leaving public school administration after making it to the role of superintendent because of my own beliefs about public education. But that's another story. But I think Dr. Brubaker had this influence on me where I can still, like, you can picture your mom on the left turn signal, and you, Philip, remember your, dad's comments to you. I remember where we were walking on the University of Connecticut campus.
Thank you for sharing that. That's excellent. Words do have a purpose.
So you can do what you want to
do. Yeah, words have a purpose, and oftentimes we just aren't conscious of that. And I love what you said right at the get-go. It's that old saying, one day at a time, which I truly believe in. But I also like, for financial advisors, that's sometimes, they're all about future planning. It's a hard concept to get over. But I think, I just looked at it as, it's you live for the day, but you plan for tomorrow. And this is, and have these conversations, as you said, even though they might be difficult. And fear, that we talked about earlier too, fear is just an acronym, stands for false evidence appearing real for oftentimes. So it's helping people get over that. And it's not easy, but that's that glorified social worker with a higher paying job if done properly. So I thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's been really fantastic having you on the podcast. I in my personal life, I think the reason why this resonated so strongly with me is that I started out the episode telling the story about when my mother died. When my mother died, and the fact that I hadn't really made any plans, because you get that in your mind of, hey, I don't want to be thinking about my mom dying if then I'm wishing for it, or having that kind of mental block. But since then, I've really, I left my profession, I traveled the world, I've seen tons of people, I've done tons of things that I've always wanted to do, and in the end, it really comes back to that moment of realizing that my mom was dead, and now the rest of my life has to happen. And really am a pessimist. My mom was always kind of glass half empty, and I've trained myself to be an optimist. But the question I ask when I get to something that I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that, I think exactly in these terms is, am I going to care the day I die? if this blows up on me and goes horribly wrong? And almost universally, the answer is no, I'm not going to care. And so then I just go do what I want. And usually it works out. Sometimes it doesn't, but it has led me to do a lot of things that I didn't think I would ever do. And but things that I wanted to do. So I think that's the reason that it really resonated with me. And again, want to thank you for coming on the podcast, and definitely check out Debbie's webpage. I will give all of her contact information in just a second after we wrap up this main section. But just want to say thank you so much, and hopefully we can have you on the podcast again sometime.
Thanks, man. Have a good day.
Thank you, Debbie.
And that is going to wrap up our main section for this week. We again want to thank Debbie Pepin for joining us. The Death To-Do List you can find at deathtodolist.com. You can also search for that Death To-Do List on LinkedIn, or you can find Debbie on Twitter at Pepin, that's Pepin _Debbie on Twitter. So let's transition now into our article review for this week. And this week I selected an article entitled "The 7 Biggest Shockers from My 4 Decades of Financial Planning." It is a financial planner just kind of walking through 7 different things that he has found surprising during his career. And I will go ahead and just read the bullet points, so those of you that haven't read the article or don't have time to pause and read the article can know what these 7 points are as we discuss them. You can find a link to the article on our website. Go to value-ability.com and click on the content tab, or look on our Twitter or Facebook pages. I always post the article review articles on our Twitter and Facebook pages as well. So number 1, pessimists prevail. Number 2, those that are the surest of their behavior are the most wrong. That was one of my favorites. 3, consumers are getting it. Indexing grabbed far more market share than I ever imagined. 4, plunging and now zero fees. 5, the bond bull market is nearly 40 years old and real interest rates are negative. 6, markets and the economy change drastically. And 7, the CFP board isn't benefiting the public. So a lot of very interesting things in there. Philip, which ones jump out at you right away?
Yeah, Dan, the first one was pessimists prevail. I just, being able to live with delayed gratification. You and I have talked about that many times throughout the 30 some odd podcasts that we've done so far. And
Coming
yeah,
up on 40.
right, coming up on 40. It's coming up on 40 years in this industry. So a few things have been resonating. And the other bit that I've learned too is that if you're a financial advisor or if you're the son talking to the parent, etc., look, you've been a good saver. Here's what, once now, and you've been very frugal. The risk you run there is what he actually points out, and I had to have this conversation with my client, is that, you know what? You've created this behavioral pattern now where you're not willing to save. I mean, you're not willing to spend. And it's okay now to spend. And you got to show them, look, you're never going to run out of money. And you might as well start enjoying this money because you've accomplished your goal. And I think that's there's a few who have actually done that, and there's quite a few who have done it. But that's the lesson you're going to have to teach those people. So that one was the big one for me.
Yeah, that is a little bit of a clickbaity. Number 1 is a little bit clickbaity, right? He doesn't really mean pessimists. What he means is the people who approach things from a overly conservative standpoint when it comes to investing, right? There's really aren't pessimists per se. pessimists probably don't get in the market to begin with, right? Those are the ones who say, I think the market's too high. I remember starting out, your partner at the very first firm I worked at had a client that was waiting for the market to get back to 4,000. The Dow Jones was at like 5,500 or something. He wants it to get back to 4,000 before he'll reinvest. And it just never came back down. Right. So that's the real pessimist, but totally agree. The people that approach it from a methodical standpoint and reject all of those wild upsides. I was just talking about it with one of my clients, the friend of his who's dabbling in Bitcoin, and not going to go off on a tangent of that subject, but anytime you're dabbling in anything without experience, you are ripe to be taken advantage of. And that was what happened with this guy's friend. He got in and things went the wrong way and he panicked and yanked his money out. So
It's that overconfidence bias oftentimes, and the pessimist bias or
right.
whatever. It's again what it bodes well for from a coaching point as an advisor to their clients. And I'm going to shameless plug. Pull up our episode on the smart money philosophy with the 4 cornerstones, and making sure cornerstone 2, your cash reserves, you put aside enough money so that they can sleep at night, that they weather any type of recession, because that's usually what the pain is. They associate pain more than they do pleasure, and that's the challenge.
One that really leapt out at me was number 6, markets and the economy changed drastically.
I was going to go the same thing.
Yeah. So this advisor graduated 40 years ago from college, and he lists the top 10 companies in 1980: IBM, AT&T, Exxon, Standard Oil, Schlumberger, Shell Oil, Mobil, Standard Oil, Atlantic Richfield, GE. Today in 2020, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway, Walmart, Tesla, Visa, Johnson & Johnson. So just a complete change. And yeah, you've really seen that over the years, right? And that the cycle just continues and continues. There's always a new crisis. There's always a new period of growth after that. The sun always rises after that quote unquote crisis that's going to end everything. And we'll see that again, right? Like, yes, this is unprecedented, but everything's unprecedented. Everything I've experienced has been unprecedented.
Absolutely. And here's what stood the test of time. And those who get rewarded are those who are willing to see in the big picture, discernment, and put it all together. We went from in history of the human being or mankind, went from agricultural to industrial. Then we hit the information, and now digital. What was going to take digital maybe 5 years to get to, this COVID has put it. We got there in 7 to 8 months. It's you just got to follow these trends and not be scared of them, but to be a student of them, and you'll be rewarded. That
Yeah, I really think about that quite a bit when there are people saying, "Oh, once we can get a handle on COVID," or people say once it's over. I don't think it's ever really going to be over. It's just going to fade away. But
right.
Are things going to go back? What's going to happen to the hot dog vendors that used to sell hot dogs to all the people downtown who aren't traveling into downtown anymore? And the answer to that is he will do something, or she. That person will do something. They're not going to stand on the corner and sell hot dogs to nobody, right? Like, these things change, and it will continue to change. And maybe this is the thing that is the boon that saves smaller towns, as you see this kind of reversal of people moving out from the city center. And that's fine. Cities see rises and falls of fortune, and it will continue. But again, the sun comes up again tomorrow, and people are still going to try and provide for their families, and they will figure something out. There's going to be hardship, yes, but I think the key here is to focus in on the things that have always remained the same, and tune out the things that yes, the details change, but in reality, they're really just repeats of the of previous things.
Yes, I'd agree. And I've always, I look back at my career. Probably the biggest thing. I think we talked about it. I came out of college with an urban studies degree with a business minor. What are you going to do with that? I thought I was going to go into politics, but then I married Lisa, and she said, "I'm not marrying a politician." Okay. Brakes put on. So my point, you got to change. And I said, and be accepting of change and be a generalist.
Right.
If you don't come out, and so you learn to adapt. And as long as our society, still rewards those that take risks, the human being over centuries is just continuously amazed the pessimist. We figure it out.
Well, that's the other thing. Even in our business, we're going down the road of building this client review process and also other parts of the financial advice process to market to financial advisors to help them build their businesses. But one of the things that's just kind of naturally popped up now is advisors wanting to go digital, wanting to say, hey, I'm
Right.
going to do this. So now we're starting to see advisors coming to us and saying, how do I make that happen? Because that's really where our rubber meets the road, right? Is on the operational, the actual doing
Yes.
side of things. Many people out there will tell you how to do it. And our focus is rolling our sleeves up and helping you actually get it done. So
So what you're saying, Dan, is that definition of a consultant. They know 50 ways to make love, but don't have a lover. We actually do know how to do it.
I don't know if that analogy works great with our business, kind of our business focus, because then there's 3 people involved in that, and that always gets awkward. So with that, we are going to
Finish this
wrap up
Dan.
for this week. If you have topics that you would like us to cover on the podcast or questions for us, you can email us at info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com, or reach out to us through social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Links are all at value-ability.com under the Contact Us tab. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. Next episode, we are going to go back and do another values-based episode 39, Personal Responsibility. I have plenty of exciting ideas on how I have failed in personal responsibility to share with everyone. What other areas do you think are important to talk about with clients if you are providing truly complete financial planning? We talk about the fact that the numbers aren't the whole picture, and obviously talking about death is something that if you're doing full planning, you need to talk about with your clients. What other topics out there are kind of being missed in the financial planning process, and we should focus a little bit more on? Reach out to us, let us know what you think on that, and we will share those ideas in an upcoming episode. As always, thank you for listening. Remember to join us next week. And remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you.
This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.